I think that on the other side, it's not just like, how do you set a firm boundary so that someone doesn't, tread on your territory? It's, how do I reach out to you in a way that you'll listen? How do I say something in a way that you can hear it? And I don't know, parents are like all humans. When we feel heard, then we're willing to hear. And that just feels like such an impossible task for someone who's been through complex trauma, that like, what? I'm supposed to like give you all this empathy for your drinking and how much pain you were in, how you weren't trying to hurt me. You were just in a bunch of da-da-da-da-da. Like, sorry, bud. Like, I'm just not going to placate to all that. And what I tell folks, and what I think I tell myself in the mirror, is that is evidence of my hurt. That is evidence of my hurt. And I have a responsibility to heal that for myself.
Welcome to Therapist Uncensored. Building on decades of professional experience, this podcast tackles neurobiology, modern attachment, and more in an honest way that's helpful in healing humans. Your session begins now with Dr. Ann Kelly and Sue Marriott.
Hey everyone, welcome back to Therapist Uncensored. So you guys are in for a real treat in today's episode. Sue and I got a chance to sit down and have an extremely engaging conversation with Matthias Barker. Now, many of you may know him already. He is best known for making his knowledge of trauma and mental health extremely accessible and understandable to the wider public. In fact, he currently has over 3 million followers on his platform. And I think after you hear him today, you'll really understand why. Now, Matthias is a psychotherapist and the CEO and co-founder of the Trauma Institute with Dr. Frank Anderson, a former guest on our show. And together, they provide training to psychotherapists and the public on how to heal from trauma, internal family systems, and so much more. But today, we cover a broad range of topics. We talk about estrangement in families, how to heal, how to cope with it, how spirituality in families can be a place of trauma or a place of healing. And we also dove into the impact of AI on mental health, the ethical dilemmas, possible future impact. It was really a fun conversation. I think you're going to love it. So before we jump in, I just want to let you guys know that you can see Matthias in person along with us and many others, just really amazing clinicians next March in Washington, D.C. at the Psychotherapy Network. And what's exciting is for our listeners, you can get 40% off your ticket. So you just go to pesi.com/TU, put that in, you get 40% off. And in fact, you can get the lowest registration rates possible because while you're there, if you add SYM50, that's SYM50, you'll get an additional $50 off your registration. So we would love it if you go. And let us know if you do. If you're a listener out there and you end up at Psychotherapy Network, send us an email at info@ and let us know you're going to be there because we love to know our listeners are there and love meeting everybody in person when we get a chance. All right, let's jump into today's episode. Welcome, Matthias. We are just really happy to have you on Therapist Uncensored. So thank you for joining us.
Yeah, thank you so much for having me. This is great. I'm excited to talk.
We often like to start with just letting you describe yourself for our audience to give them some context and just to hear how you identify.
Yeah, so I'm a psychotherapist. I do a lot of work online around the topics of like parent-child estrangement and conflict resolution. So I have different channels like on Instagram and TikTok where I do psychoeducation for not just Gen Z or millennials, but I think like there's kind of a large span of people who are all interested on how to build families back together and how to navigate conflict. So TikTok was kind of a funny place to find everybody, but that's kind of where I took off, so to speak.
Yeah, you have a pretty good following, I think, right?
I was a pretty green therapist. I was kind of just brand new, and then I started posting some just kind of regular old TikTok videos talking about, I don't know, just what I was learning, what I was reading as I was just growing, and those seemed to take off in a pretty big way. And so from that point on, I just kind of tried to get some good mentorship around me and tried to just continue to learn and form my craft as a therapist and trying to steward just a platform where I get to share about meaningful things well. So that's kind of what I do. I make content online and then I talk on estrangement.
And what is your background and interest in parent and child estrangement in particular, personally? Like, why did you land there?
Well, I think that a lot of it was inspired by just some events in my own family. I just, I had a season where I was separated from my father for about 3 years, and We were no contact for a portion of that. And then there was a portion of that that was kind of semi-contact, but pretty strained. And what I started to notice was not just that many of my clients also seemed to kind of have conflicts with parents or with kids, with adult kids, but when I would make videos online about it, it just seemed to like take off in a huge way. And there's just so many people that related to what it's like to just feel not relaxed around your mom or your dad, or to feel really just on edge around your kid. Like everything that you say is like a test. Like they're zooming in on every tiny little thing that you're saying and picking it apart. And especially if you're in a strained relationship where you're worried that they might pull back or not engage with you, it's like, gosh, I don't know if I say the wrong thing, are they just going to stop calling or stop coming over? And yeah, I just saw that it was a widely relatable thing. There was a study that came out 2023. It was the largest study on parent-child estrangement that's ever been done. And it was essentially reported that 25% of folks that were surveyed had been estranged from a parent at some point in their life. And so I'm like, a fourth, that is wild. A fourth of folks in the United States, that's 67 million people claim that they've had at least a portion where they were no contact with a parent. And so I'm just like, okay, there seems to be something happening. So I kind of dove in out of just personal interest to try to just build back my own family relationship and try to understand how to just feel relaxed around my dad again. And I realized so much of that work was in me. It wasn't just trying to convince him through conversation to kind of act a certain way or behave a certain way. So much of it was, just the effect that actions were having on me that actually was probably more to do with my own personal healing. So I think discovering that was just really sweet and good. It was a good process to kind of move through. I'm still kind of working, I don't know, like all relationships are in progress, so I think that I'm teaching on this topic frequently, but I'm also learning on this topic. I'm still learning that there's so many families that were different, of course, than what you personally relate to.
Well, in these days right now with the division and the high political discourse and polarization that is happening, and finding out one thing about someone and then feeling like you no longer know them. And also in the queer community, certainly being disowned, and with trans folks who, their family rejects them. So when you talk about this, like your perspective, is it more like being cut off by a parent, or is it adult children cutting off parents?
It really depends who you ask, because generationally, I think there's even a big difference. Like, I don't know, like, I don't think that boomers, for example, were really thinking about cutting off their parents in kind of large swaths. They were more worried about getting disowned by their parents, for being in an interracial marriage, for coming out gay, whatever it is. Like, it seemed like there was a tide that shifted over really when millennials got on the scene. And millennials are more likely to cut off contact with their parents than to be disowned by their parents. And of course, that can cut both ways, and everyone's family is different. But, from my lens, just kind of working with people within my community and on social media, it seems like there's a lot of people who are learning just the value of boundaries and just kind of opening up to doing some personal work where they realize, like, hey, there's some behavior that's kind of been normal that we've grown up with that actually isn't very normal and is actually kind of toxic and unhealthy. And I'm actually going to set up some boundaries against that. And if that continues, I'm not going to just willingly subject myself to it over and over. But I think that, I don't know, we're in just like with all, I think, movements within culture, we're kind of learning what is the best way to kind of advocate for one's boundaries, and what is the best way to advocate for, I don't know, the health that you want within your family. I think a lot of parents that I talk to feel that their kind of millennial age and younger children are pretty accusational. They come in with a lot of anger, and they are really quick to put labels on things like abusive and trauma. And I think to just different generations, that's like, whoa, what trauma? What in the world? Like for some generations, trauma just meant war. Trauma meant you were tortured or something. So the idea of like complex trauma and just the psychoeducation that's taken place over social media and just within culture, especially within the past like 5 to 10 years, so many more people are just more educated on what it means to go through complex trauma or to just suffer from, emotionally immature parents, and just the labels and the standards that they felt like they couldn't live up to, and the effects that's having on them as a person, on their bodies. It's just, there's so many factors at play that are just seem like they're changing so frequently and rapidly. So I don't know. I'm in the mix trying to learn just like the rest of us are, but I'm seeing that there's some things that have been genuinely helpful that we're kind of learning.
Yeah, you mentioned the millennial, like the lesson of sort of, setting a boundary. And sometimes that's so confusing because a boundary can come across sometimes threatening. If I'm not going to live under this toxic dynamic, so it needs to change, or else there's this like inevitable or else of the cutoff. And it feels like that generation has really struggled with this idea of cutoff in their own friendships, that it ends up raising a lot of anxiety. Like, how do you form boundaries and look at yourself and challenge your parents and be challenged in a way that you stay in unless it is toxic? What's the line of toxicity versus this is really hard and I really like what's going on, but I'm in for the long haul and I have this like connection that I want to stay in. And I think that's a tough balance for kids to learn, or
Oh,
adults too.
certainly. Yeah, something I'm learning. And that changes in time. I think that what a lot of people find is, I think moving through like your 20s, maybe early 30s, there's kind of a healthy differentiation from your parents, that you're kind of starting to kind of make your own way in the world, and you're trying to learn what it means to be your unique individual self, not just kind of what you grew up or what you were told you kind of had to be. And then for folks who kind of go into child rearing, there's kind of a new dependence that you have on mom and dad. You want to get closer to family, and you want to, if possible, gain support, whether that's childcare or financially or whatever. And then when you start to raise your own kids, there's also just, I don't know, you start to really reflect on parenting, and you reflect on what it means to, do I discipline my kids the way my parents did? Do I have the same temper? do I emotionally disconnect? Do I dissociate and just, try to get through it? Like, oh, I wonder if that's connected to how I grew up. And what I just see so frequently, especially in my groups, I have like 1,000 people within a group where we kind of meet regularly and we talk through just how to kind of move towards healing within family relationships. And there's so many people who are just in their like late 20s, early to mid 30s that are in that season, like I'm describing, that are just like, oh man, it's so painful. It's so painful to realize that, I don't know, like my mom raised me this particular way. And that was so hard for me. And I just can't imagine spanking my kid, or I just can't imagine leaving my kid in their room to, for a timeout for, even 15, 20 minutes. Like that just seems cruel, or something along those lines. Like you just have this comparison. You just have this comparison of, I was raised this way. This is the way I'm trying to raise my kids. My parents are still in my life. And it's like I have a foot in 3 different worlds, and I'm trying to reconcile all of that. And that's where I think a lot of people come to reckon with some of the suppressed feelings and the frustrations that they'd felt kind of all throughout.
Well, and it sounds like with the community that you're able to provide kind of, there's a depth to it and getting into the complexity and things like that. But just for those listening, and to give a little bit of an idea of what that's like, could you speak to like what are some of the most common things that you might say both to the young person who's cut off their family, right? There's probably certain messaging that you end up saying over and over. Can you give us a sample of that? And then the same in reverse, right? Where the parent has cut off the child.
When I talk to adult kids, the first thing I just kind of bring up is like, what we normally do in families where there's tension and things aren't okay is we try to grit through it. We try to be respectful. We try to not say anything. We try not to start the fight. We kind of go over for Christmas. We go over for the birthday party, whatever. And there's the comments we don't like. There's the intrusive questions. There's the boundaries that are crossed. And we try to not make a big deal out of it. That's the first step almost always. And then it's like it grates at you. And it builds up into this emotional pressure where there's either some sort of release where maybe you kind of lose your temper, you get frustrated, you kind of like lay out an accusation against mom, or you just withdraw because at some point it's just like, I just can't keep doing this anymore. And I just don't know how to bring it up. I don't have faith that like if I brought it up with my mom, she'd actually change. This is just who she is. And so it just feels easier just to pull back and to either set up emotional barriers or even physical, like to go no contact. And then the adult parents are kind of left like, what just happened? Like you just started pulling back out of nowhere. Or there was like one thing, like I made a comment about your new tattoo and then you blew up on me and now you won't talk to me. Like what? Like really? Over the new tattoo? Like that was it? Like you're throwing away this whole relationship over a comment? So both people in this circumstance are really lost as to what's going on for the other person. I think that the parent doesn't see that really there's an iceberg of patterns, of comments, of missed attempts of connection that have been played out for a long time. It was kind of like a straw that breaks the camel's back kind of moment. And so much of the woundedness that happens within parent-child relationships starts off with good intentions. And I think that's what makes it hard for parents to be able to see and build a bridge, because it's like, well, hold on. I wasn't telling you that you weren't good enough. I was just trying to make sure you did good in school. Like, I was just trying to make sure I gave you structure, that you would actually be able to perform, that you would have a competitive advantage in being able to get into the school that you wanted to. Like, I wasn't trying to tell you that you weren't good enough for me if you didn't get an A. Like, what do you mean? And almost all the ways that we hurt our kids are paved with good intentions. And we rarely are maliciously trying to break our kids down. Like, there's certainly people out there that are so entrenched in their trauma and maybe addiction or whatever that certainly happens. But for the vast majority of us, it's like, I wasn't trying to pressure you in some sort of self-worth way. I was just trying to make sure you were okay, and that you would succeed, and that you would excel. I just wanted to make sure you would grow up and be okay. Like, there's some sort of good intention in all of the prodding or in all of the high pressure, that feels lost when the kid just goes, "You didn't see me." And I think that what the kid kind of fails to see is not so much that, oh, well, mom and dad, they had good intentions, like yada yada. It's more so like, I'm contributing to this negative cycle and just biting my tongue. And there's so much of the conflict that I'm avoiding, that I should probably start to speak up and like let them know that this is a problem for me. And maybe I'm bringing this up when it's an 8 or 9 out of 10 in intensity, and maybe I should have brought it up when it was a 4 out of 10, so that it didn't bottle up so intensely. And I can't make someone change, right? Like, I can't, there's no perfect wording. There's nothing I can do that's going to make someone want to be different, but I can influence people. We all have influence. And maybe if I were to try to draw near them gently, to try to understand what was the intention behind that when you acted that way, when you were spanking me, when you were punishing me, what was the intention there? And that is something I think that we can't really hold space for, even just within our own hearts and psyche, until we've done some of that personal healing ourselves. And so the first thing that I tell kids is not, okay, time to go have all these hard conversations with mom and dad. It's, hey, let's actually move into some personal healing for yourself first. And what was it like for you when, mom wasn't there? She was out with, her partner, just doing, whatever. And then you felt like you were coming home to an empty house all the time. What was it like for you when you felt like your big brother was the favorite and he was the one kind of getting doted over, and you were kind of left in his shadow? And when you can hold space and go through those personal layers of healing for those experiences for yourself, then it's so much easier to move towards your parent and to have, a version of empathy for, like, okay, maybe you weren't trying to establish my big brother as the favorite, but it certainly felt that way. And there were certainly ways that we got different treatment. And even in some of these comments, this is the way that it's affecting me. And because you can hold space for positive intention, the parent doesn't get nearly as defensive when you have those conversations. And then they have a better chance at hearing you. Because I think that on the other side, it's not just like, how do you set a firm boundary so that someone doesn't, tread on your territory? It's, how do I reach out to you in a way that you'll listen? How do I say something in a way that you can hear it? And I don't know, parents are like all humans. When we feel heard, then we're willing to hear. And that just feels like such an impossible task for someone who's been through complex trauma, that like, what? I'm supposed to like give you all this empathy for your drinking and how much pain you were in, how you weren't trying to hurt me. You were just in a bunch of da-da-da-da-da. Like, sorry, bud. Like, I'm just not going to placate to all that. And what I tell folks, and what I think I tell myself in the mirror, is that is evidence of my hurt. That is evidence of my hurt. And I have a responsibility to heal that for myself. And what I know, just as being a therapist for a while, just working with clients, walking this long road with several people, is like, when you go through those layers of healing, the appropriate and mature empathy arises quite naturally. It's not something you have to try to get up and go in with your willpower. It's not something you grit your teeth through. It's like, I think mom had a pretty rough upbringing herself, and I don't think she had a lot of resources and tools. And I think she was trying to do right by me. And even though she was like really prodding and over involved and critical, I think in her own way, that was her just being really anxious, and she was trying to help me. And she just didn't know how to say it. She just didn't know how to do it. So she got controlling. But I think that controllingness was a weird, dysregulated version of love. And I don't have to agree with what happened or pretend like what happened didn't hurt me to say that there's a human under there that in some moments was trying to do right by me. And so when you can offer that kind of empathy and understanding to a parent as you're bringing up the behaviors and the patterns that do need to change in the present, that is so much more of an effective strategy that's going to bring about the result that you want. Because someone could say like, well, why would I go through all that? I don't deserve to have to be the grown up here. Like, in the conversation, why do I have to take the high road and be all empathetic when they're not that way towards me? And then I fall back on what I just said. Yeah, that's hurt. That resentment at taking the high road is just your body saying, I'm not going to willpower my way through this. I'm not going to just will myself into some sort of like, smile with gritted teeth, pretending to be all empathetic just so that you'll change your behavior. Like that's just, you're putting the cart before the horse. The healing needs to take place first.
Like at some point, the parent-child part falls away, and it's just you're doing now deep therapy, and whether that be in group or couples, or in this case, these family configurations. So I love it because it's not just a 3-point model or whatever. It's really what you're inviting people to do is certainly what Ann and I, we have a book, Secure Relating, and the whole thing is like once you can regulate your nervous system and understand the other person is activated and what's happening, it's it's not just, we say it's not just me, it's my amygdala. Once you buy into that, it just naturally, then you're going to, like all those things that you're saying that you want to happen, you first have to get that safety and that feeling of being understood or validated, or what you're upset about makes sense. And then we can open up into a more relational space. And we've been, thinking about this with the big political divide too. It's like we've got to get back to a sense of safety and connection and seeing people complexly and not turning everybody into one thing. That's the way that I'm hearing it, is really resonating around. You're inviting people to go deeper and to really to do their work, and that naturally the thing that occurs from that is more capacity to hold complexity and difference and empathy.
And I would say the same thing on the side of the parents, because it's like, it's really hard when you have someone lob an accusation at you, like you never loved me, or like you were never there for me. It's like, how in the world do I respond to that? And what I talk about is just looking for some of the tender emotions underneath the anger. That really underneath of anger, you have sadness, you have shame, you have fear. You have these like tender emotions underneath. I mean, anger can be its own emotion of its own right, certainly. But like when you start to see like, oh, this brazen accusation of you never loved me is actually a very rough package for an internal feeling of, I want so badly to be seen by you. I want so badly to be held and cared for. It's shame underneath. It's fear underneath. It's grief underneath. And then I'm like, talk to it as if it was grief. Talk to it as if it was shame, and watch what happens. Because when someone says, you never cared about me, and then you respond, what was it like for you when we went through, I don't know, I was never at your high school games. What was it like for you when I never came to your track meets? And you looked at the finish line and I wasn't there. What was that like? You suspend your defense. You suspend your, hold on, do you know all the ways I've sacrificed for you? Like, how could you say I never cared about you? Like, don't you remember da-da-da-da-da? And you just get to the experience. And then they can share, I just felt so alone. I was devastated you weren't there. I wanted more than anything for you just to turn the corner and you to be there. And then to take accountability and responsibility and be like, I'm so sorry. I didn't realize how important it was at the time, but I can see how important it was now. That will just take all the fizzy, like spiky emotions and just release them like a big deep breath. Because that's all an adult kid is trying to do, is just say, see this pain I'm in. and see what's happening. And then when you do this, it keeps rubbing up against the pain and I don't know what to do. So I just either need to get away from you or I need you to see that you're rubbing up against it. And then for a parent to be able to have the state of mind to come towards the experience first before offering the defense.
I love this. And here's the how-to. As someone who certainly have been given feedback that I can come across in the you didn't do the thing, when I'm actually injured. It's like, yes, listen to what he's saying. That's good. Anne, are you listening? Sometimes our presentation is is not what doesn't invite the thing that we actually want.
Well, and we're getting underneath, like you said, Matthias, we're getting underneath the anger that it's a protection, right? When you say that sounds like hurt, and then we let go of the fear. I mean, when we kind of go deeper, we don't have to stay in the fear that if I get compassionate, I lose myself, right? If I can go deeper, I'm not, and go, oh, this has been really painful for me. And then I can see the other person in a more robust light. Neither one of us need our defenses as much.
Yeah, your protectors don't know how to solve this relationship. Your protectors don't know how to build it back. Your protectors don't know how to set a boundary. They will try. they will try, but it will be dysregulated and there's so much data that they can't drink in because as we know with protectors, like those are young parts of us that don't understand the complexity in the same way that self does.
And your parents have that, right? Your parents are just as vulnerable in some ways. And of course, like you mentioned, the trying to get the young ones to go and do their work so they can approach the parents doing their work so that they can receive that it's not their entire identity or failure as a parent to have really taken in where they've created harm or hurt. And to be able to hold that space in the way you beautifully said. And like you said, Sue, we can't always do that perfectly, even though we want to. But God.
Well, I have a question to kind of translate this a little bit. Like, what is the tie-in related to spiritual harm, like that kind of parental harm? Can you speak to that a little bit?
Yeah, I mean, I think spiritual harm, you couldn't ask for bigger ammo, could you? Like, it's not just that I'm disappointed in you, God's disappointed in you. I mean, is there a heavier hammer to bring down on somebody? I just don't know.
Kids and God are the two things you can't argue with.
Yeah, well, it's the ultimate trump card. It's just like, well, God says so. It's in the word or, whatever. I've talked to so many folks who are, and not just millennial folks, but folks in their 50s, 60s, who are just now realizing all the layers of shame and just restriction on self-expression and calm, just the fear they held in their bodies that came from the way their parents held spirituality. And there's a few different stages that I see with it. It's like, at first, there's kind of an anger at the spirituality itself. So whether that's Christianity or Islam or whatever you grew up with, like there's something, toxic about the religion, so to speak. But then you kind of get a bit more specific. And then you're like, well, hold on. I think that there's actually probably a wide variety of ways to hold any particular spiritual practice. But the way my parents held their spirituality was influenced by their own childhood trauma. And they used their spirituality to do particular things within the family, to soothe their sense of not being in control, to calm their anxiety and soothe their own pain, and to try, from an anxious place, to secure a world for me where everything can go well, whether that's me going to heaven, whether that's me, whatever. Like, they used fear to accomplish good things. When you use fear to try to accomplish good things, people get hurt. And then that's when things start to get a bit more specific. And then I think the spirituality stuff almost starts to evaporate a little bit. And then we're right back to just me and mom, or me and that pastor. Like, I know some of my spiritual hurt was just, I got so mad at church for a long time. And then I realized I don't think I'm mad at church. I think I'm just mad at that pastor, like the one that hurt me. Even that pastor is a multi-dimensional kind of person. Like, there was ways that pastor tried to do right by me. And then there was ways that he acted that were really hurtful, and beliefs that he really insisted on that, man, created a lot of headache for me. And I mean, you think about it like a kid. I mean, if a kid gets bitten by a snake they're not going to stop and look and be like, well, is that a gardener snake? Is that a rattlesnake? Like they're just like, all snakes bad. Forget snakes. If there's a snake, I'm running. So that's the natural first thing to do when you're really hurt by something, is to make broad generalizations and then to completely discard categories completely. And then you grow up and you realize, like, well, there's a big difference between a gardener snake and, a rattlesnake. And I can have different kinds of proportionate responses to the nuances that I'm actually seeing in front of me. And then there's kind of a sweet season on the tail end, once you've kind of done that process of healing that hurt, where people try to recapture versions of the faith they grew up with, or maybe a new faith that they bring on entirely. Because we're all spiritual creatures. Like, I just think spirituality, we're talking about the way that the transcendent affects our feelings and our bodies. That's what spirituality is in my mind. When I define spirituality, it is the intersection of our body and our feelings with the transcendent and the divine. I think many people say this in different ways, but I just believe that we are more than just the bones and blood and arteries. There's something, whether you want to call it our rationality and our reason, or soul, or whatever you want to call it. There's something unique and divine and inspired about us as humans. And we experience that within our bodies and within our feelings. And I think that everyone's trying to get to the bottom of exactly what's going on there.
And then spirituality being used as this, or religion in particular, being used as a bludgeon, as a place for humans to control or to reject. So there's that piece too. And, where it's more, you're traumatized by internalizing these messages. And like you're saying, sorting out like what spirituality, what was the bludgeon, what was being used, what was being harmful, and then where do I land on the other end about what my beliefs really are, and is there room to come back to something that is larger than myself, where I don't have to reject anything Christian or anything that has to do with the way that I was harmed.
The analogy I like is that I'm not allergic to it anymore. It feels like every time I eat bread, my stomach hurts, but then there's this moment of like, I don't know, maybe now I can digest some of this and it doesn't give me the same queasy feeling that it used to give me. I can sit in a church service and feel relaxed, when before that was just not even on the table. Whether or not I'm agreeing with what whoever's saying on stage or whatever, it's like the effect it's having on me transforms. That's something we go through in every phase of life. Like whether we're talking about mom, whether we're talking about church, whether we're talking about God, like
partners.
Yeah, partners. Oh, yes. Amen. Yeah, partners is there's the effect that it's having on you and the toxic effect that it's having in your own soul. And then when you heal that hurt, it opens up new ways for relating to that same entity, even if the entity didn't change, even if your partner's still the same, dysfunction they had before, even if your mom is the same kind of dysfunction, she was before, even if the pastor's preaching the same sermons, it's like the effect it has on you is different because it's not rubbing up against an unhealed wound. Like I think Gabor Mate is such a great analogy for this, where he's just like, imagine having a burn wound on your shoulder. If you just brushed up against your shirt, you would have a huge reflex of pain. You would really react strongly. And it's like, well, why? It's because you have an open wound. And so that nerve is exposed. It's right on the surface of the skin. So of course you're going to react strongly. And then when you heal and those tissues are scarred over or healed over, that's when you can brush up against the shoulder again, but it doesn't have the same effect. And so that's why I just put in all my chips on the healing thing. I think that takes so much of the guesswork out of like, how do I sit in church and not just feel nauseous?
Well, and it goes back to the boundary thing too, that like, if I got this wound because someone was like, it was toxic, like it was actually harmful to me, and then being able to, okay, I'm not taking that in. That's not going to get close to my skin again. But this over here, yes.
Have that mature ability to kind of look and then extend trust where it's merited and then withhold trust where it's not.
But not have to stay in that sort of guarded space. Like, the healing allows us to put down the guard to be in relationship again. to be in connection with God or the church or with our
the
parents.
partner. Yeah.
Or the partner, because now instead of having to stay in this guarded place, or you're going to take control of me, or I'm going to lose my sense of self, or be rejected by this, shaming God who's ready to catch you, you're all of a sudden in relationship with what you need from it, and then can see the connection to the transcendent or to the parent. And
It's more of a secure state, and it's secure back and forth, mutuality, all of those good things.
so one of our new sponsors that we are excited about is Peak Tea. We are happy to be talking about Nandeka. It's the pinnacle of coffee alternatives, which are actually powered by mushrooms. Now, I really want my mental focus and my clarity to be high. Besides exercise, I really often find myself a little over relying on tea and caffeine fixes to keep me going and keep me pumped up. Not always do the greatest effect, especially in the afternoons. But since I've replaced my morning tea fix with Peak's Nandeka, I really feel like it's such a great and healthier alternative. It's a slow release caffeine from probiotic fermented teas and mushrooms. And since I've been drinking it, it gives me much more sustained energy throughout the day. And it even, by the way, activates my metabolism. And it's delicious. Instead of my kind of boring tea bags that I brew in the morning, it's really like a creamy, indulgent, spiced hot chocolate. It's smooth. And I'm actually not a coffee drinker, even though it's a coffee alternative. It is a wonderful caffeine alternative. And I have had friends try it when they're trying to kind of lower their coffee intake, and they really love the flavor too. And I noticed that I don't get caffeine jitters or that afternoon slump, and I love that. So Peaks Nandeca provides sustainable all-day energy. It makes you feel like you're doing something good for your body. So try Peak. Get up to 20% off plus a free rechargeable frother and glass beaker when you purchase exclusively at peaklife.com. PIQUELIFE.com/TU. So you let them know that you discovered them on our podcast. That would be great support. Our human body never ceases to amaze me. Every day it's working to keep us strong, mobile, and connected to others. We speak a lot about neuroplasticity on our podcast and our body's ability to continue to grow throughout our lives. And it's hugely important how we can rebuild ourselves. But of course, as time goes by, we often could use just a little extra support to keep those natural processes going. So that's why I'm excited about Ancient Nutrition's multi-collagen advanced lean supplement. Here's what caught my attention. They've taken a lot of wisdom for what we know our body needs and combined it with modern science to create something actually pretty special. We're talking about a premium formula with 10 types of collagen from 10 real food sources. And believe me, quality matters. Now, I appreciate how they focus on overall wellness. Their clinically studied formula helps with healthy weight management and building lean muscle. It helps us also reduce joint discomfort, which for me is really important after my workout. So the best part is it's pretty simple. You just add it to your coffee or morning smoothies. It's not very complicated. Ancient Nutrition is offering 25% off your first order when you go to ancientnutrition.com/TU. So that's ancientnutrition.com/TU for 25% off your first order. ancientnutrition.com/TU.
So going from then spirituality to almost the opposite of that, technology and artificial intelligence and the impact of that. I can't tell you, Ann and I get pitched so often from these AI companies wanting to, and honestly, we really don't know yet where we're landing on it. But, my understanding is a lot of these products want to listen to your session and then write your notes for you and then, do all those things. But as a therapist, right, like it feels just the opposite of like, where's that going and who's hearing and, confidentiality. I guess maybe we can start this part of the conversation if you wouldn't mind sharing some of your experience with AI.
Oh, sure. Yeah. Well, I wrote an article that essentially me saying that I went through kind of the headache of building out an AI bot that was essentially going to therapize people. I mean, not maybe with the same efficacy of a human therapist. I mean, that we're still far off from that, but with a pretty good chance of like stirring up some meaningful conversation and getting you to think about things perhaps that you haven't thought of before, and through things like journal prompts, and you could write out essentially kind of your whole background or what you're struggling with, and then it could draw out inconsistencies in your thinking or where you're contradicting yourself, or it can interpret your dreams, like kind of give you like a Jungian dream interpretation. So like there's a lot of utility that AI has to, help someone explore and uncover things in their mental health.
Wait, you created this?
Yeah, so I was working on essentially fine-tuning a bot that was going to be able to do this. So without going too much into the technical end, you can essentially use something called the API of like ChatGPT, which is you can put the engine of ChatGPT into whatever parameters you want, and you can kind of build it out and custom fit it to what you think it should be able to do, and then you can tell it how you want it to respond. And I was going to offer this as a product, for people to be able to purchase or use for a fee, and then I just got so spooked by the whole thing. The thing was, like, it was working, and it was actually really cool. Like I was using it even to process some of my own stuff, and then I just thought, this is wrong. And I just took a sober step back and just be like, I don't think, even if this did work, even if this was ethical, even if this was safe, would this be desirable? And so I wrote an article where I essentially threw away like a $20,000 project that I invested all this money in, and just halted it completely and did nothing with it because I just felt on an ethical front that even if it was successful, this wouldn't be what was best for people. Because a lot of people were worried, like, well, what if, like a bot couldn't handle someone's suicidality? Like someone's suicidal, they're talking to this bot, like we wouldn't be able to kind of oversee how a bot would be able to handle that situation. My conviction, and this is just my opinion, I don't have data to back this up, but my opinion, having worked with these programs, is like, I actually think it could probably handle suicidal de-escalation pretty well. Like, I think that if it was chatting back and forth, you probably couldn't differentiate much between another like human on the other side of a chat service and a bot. And I think a bot would probably be able to handle it just fine. A bot doesn't get tired. A bot doesn't get sleepy. A bot doesn't use typos. I don't know. Like, and some people could argue that if we replace suicide hotlines with AI, that might actually be a benefit.
Now, do you think that would be true if the person knew they were speaking to AI?
I think so. Yeah, for younger people, not older folks, but young people don't care, is what I've found. I think that there's some people who just get freaked out by the idea of talking to a robot, and that just kind of gives them a little bit of shivers of, this is creepy, this is weird. But then I think there's younger folks who it's just part of the way they grew up, and it's somewhat normal, so that doesn't bother them in the same way. But I mean, that's not to say that there isn't something in the human connection. I guess I'm getting a little off my point, but my point was, I think the bot could be successful. And a lot of people push back on me on that point, but that's actually not my main point. My main point was, even if it is successful, I don't think we should do it. And I brought up a few different reasons that I thought we shouldn't. One of them was something called alpha persuade. And alpha persuade is this idea that what happens if the bot gets so good that it can change people's minds? So, I mean, think about like Facebook algorithms, like Facebook ads, like how much, has our election, even just recently in the United States, been swayed by just how media was used and Facebook ads were used just across social media. Like the clips that were kind of built of people saying things that they didn't really say, or things being taken out of context, or like AI voiceovers of certain clips, just to kind of push people towards one agenda or the other. Like, it's pretty profound, like how people can actually push people into certain kinds of actions or certain ways of thinking by the use of algorithms. And algorithms is a version of AI. It's a less advanced version than, I mean, maybe not even less advanced. It's probably just advanced as like a large language model, but we've already had first contact with some of these bots being used in the real world. And what I was reading was just like, we're not really well equipped to handle the technology we already do have, and how it's already swaying elections, or how it's swaying people's opinions on things, or people's opinions on health, or what kind of diet they're going to go on, or what kind of supplements they take, or what they choose to buy. Like, that's already so persuasive. What happens when you have a large language model that's able to have like long Socratic dialogues with people and could talk people into leaving their marriage or talk people into, maybe saving their life through a suicide prevention hotline? But what if the power was within that bot to talk people out of continuing to live and unaliving themselves? So we're training these bots to become persuasive. That's what we're doing. We're giving the bots information and feeding them data so that they become better and better and better at convincing people to do things. That's like the activity of marketing. And so I was just like, what happens when you give these large language models access to people's mental health information and people's pseudo therapy sessions with an AI bot, and the bot gets better and better and better at convincing people of things? And then I'm like, who's at the helm of that power? Is it Sam Altman, the CEO of OpenAI? Is it Russia? Is it like who gets to use the big bad bot that can convince people with a pretty high percentage success rate of any propaganda that you put inside of it? We're talking about a force that has tremendous ability to create suffering and to reallocate power in the world. And so almost like on a philosophical level, I felt like I shouldn't contribute to this. This isn't a good idea. And I think a lot of people disagreed with my article because they thought I was a little bit optimistic of what I thought AI could do. So like my comments that, oh yeah, it could help with the suicide hotline, people were like, that's crazy. Those bots can't do anything. But I pair that with a great amount of dread, honestly, of like, hold on, if this gets really, really powerful and this can do a lot of impressive things, that bestows a lot of power on the people who control it. And so let's not feed people the data set of people's deepest internal thoughts and feelings and internal processes, because the more information it has on that kind of deep level, the more it's going to be able to manipulate people. So, and then you could say like, well, Matthias, you and your one bot isn't, not making your one bot probably isn't going to slow much of anything down. Like people are already doing it. And that's true. Like there's already services out there that are essentially advertising what I was building and better than what I was building, because I was building my thing 2 or 3 years ago. And so it's advanced far beyond, what I was building now. And yeah, I think just on like a moral level, I just wasn't willing to contribute to it and profit off it. I just found that violated my values the more that I thought about it. I think one last bit I'll say here is there's this story of Oppenheimer, the guy who made the nuclear bomb. The pressure that he was under to create this bomb and then to test it was, do we test it and possibly risk like lighting the atmosphere on fire? Like this could actually like destroy the earth. If we get this experiment wrong, this bomb could really destroy everybody. But do we move forward because, well, the Nazis are trying to build the bomb too, and whoever builds the bomb first wins? There's kind of this external pressure that maybe we should push forward amidst danger, because, well, if we're the ones in control of it, then we're going to be the good guys that use it well and that no one's going to get hurt. And I think a lot of people are like, well, there's a lot of people building these AI bots out there. May as well build good ones. Why just let the people who don't know what they're talking about build AI therapy bots? We should have good therapists with good intentions out there building therapy bots, so that at least there's good ones out there. And I think it's the same moral conundrum that Oppenheimer was in. Because the big thing with Oppenheimer is like, yeah, you're right. You won World War II, but World War III might be lost for all of us. And maybe the Hitler would have figured out how to make the bomb, maybe not. And so you introduced a power into the world that hasn't blown everything up yet, but it might. I don't know. There's already a lot of stress in the air around the US and Russia right now, and just Russia recently using a ballistic missile with a lot of power on it. And we're constantly underneath the shadow of that kind of technology now because someone created it. And so I just don't think in the grand scheme of things it was wise to introduce it. And so I think with AI, it's the same kind of thing.
Yeah, and it's kind of the fear-based, the rationality that we can give ourselves to do things that we know compromises something that's hugely important. Like this idea, somebody's going to build it, so we better be the first ones or the right ones. But it's a powerful thought that we're helping people put their deepest, darkest secrets, the way they think, the way they feel, into a computer that can learn to use it in a way that then comes back that you're unaware of, that it can be just turned against you so easily without your awareness. So I love that you're bringing the awareness of that out. We've been really dying to talk to you about it since reading some or listening to some of the things you said, because it really philosophically awoke something in me about we get to be the ones to say, wait, this is impacting. Look at our election. How do we get to this place and time where we quit thinking about human relationships and we're thinking about efficiency, effectiveness, and control? And who is the most powerful one in the room is not what we should be focusing on. We're talking about the relational connections.
So that's all terrifying.
Yeah, it is. I was scared by it. Yeah.
It's all terrifying. And even, like the Tesla is AI, right? It's learning. I mean, it's already happening, like you said, with algorithms and things like that. But what about, I know, like, I think Deb Dana even was involved in where that it could read like flushing of your face and things like that for a live person. It wasn't exactly what you were describing. Or any of these other things that are coming up, like how could it be helpful? I mean, I have found myself asking, I call it Maud, not Claude, but asking Maud all kinds of questions. So I mean, just practically speaking, where does that information go? Like is already like all the things that all of us are putting into these robots, is that already being collected?
Yeah, I think it is. And I think everything I'm talking about is almost like even a little outdated, to be honest with you, because I think the bot has already been trained and already gathered a lot of the data that I'm worried about it getting its hands on. So as far as like what it's healthy for, like I'm not like I guess a Luddite saying that we shouldn't use it at all. Like I think that I use ChatGPT pretty frequently. I think it's a very interesting tool, and I have it open on my browser most of the time as I'm just kind of creating and I don't know, responding to complicated emails or whatever. Like I think that there's a lot of creativity that you can use it for. Yeah, like Deb Dana using it to track, the flush on the face. Super cool. I haven't heard about that, but I think it's going to transform a lot of medical science and our ability to understand our bodies and figure out disease. And I think there's a lot of benefits. My argument was never that there's not going to be benefits. My argument was what happens if there's too many? Like it's so beneficial. I don't know, just when you create value, you bestow power. And power's not bad. But when we talk about it in gargantuan volumes, it just raises the question of who has that power.
Exactly. Who's the Oz? Who's the man behind the curtain? Yeah.
And then what else can you use that power for? So a power that can figure out any of the disease that's in your body and figure out, what your perfect regimen of vitamins needs to be for your particular whatever. Sweet. But what else could you do with a bot that knows bodies that well? I don't know. Could it be used to engineer disease? And that's where you can kind of become a little bit of you can go down a pretty negative spiral of like hopelessness of just like, oh, we're doomed. And I guess I'm not trying to recommend we all do that. I think that my action point at the end of that article wasn't don't use AI, don't use some of the cool innovations, stop being excited about it or anything like that. I think there's going to be a lot of really cool innovation. It's just like, let's be watchful for the power it's bestowing and then the kinds of ethical terrain that arise because of all these huge advantages. I think that every introduction of technology creates a new field of ethical dilemmas. And I was just raising awareness of the ethical dilemma.
I'm so impressed and love your position that you took on it. And it might happen anyway, but you just don't want your name on it. And you don't want to be a part of that push for sure. So am I right to be then for us to be declining these these pitches for folks these AI things to help therapists? That's my question is like, where does all those recorded conversations go?
That's interesting. I mean, what some of them that I've seen are HIPAA compliant. There's a few of them that are HIPAA compliant, and that the data that you're using them to record, like on a Zoom session. So let's say you're doing a Zoom therapy session, and it's recording that session, and then it's transcribing that session. It's doing your session notes for you. There's ones, I believe, like Firefly is one of them. Firefly will not send that data out to the larger machine of it all. It keeps that localized onto your particular account. And then that information isn't shared because it's health information. It's not shared with kind of anyone else outside of just your particular access to it.
Do you believe that?
Well, it would be illegal for them to say not. I mean, they could be operating an illegal business, but the scale at which they're doing it, I guess maybe I'm naive.
So you would, I mean, I'm really mean, like, so you would trust that if it's said to be contained, that it is actually contained.
As advertised, it does seem safe on a HIPAA front. We do have to ask the question if they're being honest. And there's certainly, like, the FDA has shut down some of these startup projects. And I think therapists are learning which ones to trust and which ones not. Like, I think we can sit back and wait for some of the action to kind of pop off before maybe getting personally involved in it to see which ones we want to use and not use. I don't know. I think, like, it's funny because I'm the guy telling everyone to be scared of the AI, but my imagination just goes to, like, it would be kind of cool to have feedback on your sessions, a bot that says, like, you did 50% of the talking and you got off track. You wanted to use IFS interventions, but you got off track and did some talk therapy at minute 20 mark, and then you didn't quite explore the 6Fs, and then you should have updated the part, but you didn't. Like, it would be that would be helpful. And if the bot theoretically was kind of self-contained, like I'm just describing, that it wasn't feeding and informing kind of a larger system, that technically, I guess, solves my dilemma as it speaks with that particular ethical dilemma that I was speaking to. But I don't know. And so, yeah, I guess I'm not really here to sound the alarm on the note-taking apps. I think that some of them might be okay. We'll find out in time. But yeah.
Well, will bots protect us? Couldn't we have bots monitoring bots, and like the good bot that
Yeah.
good
And
bot
then we'll need a bot to monitor that bot, and then a bot to monitor
I
that
could already see. Just buy this one and I will monitor that bot that you're spending $29.95 for. I think it's just like this idea of increasing awareness. Like, I don't hear you saying all of this is bad, put your phone away and don't use it. But you're saying informed awareness, and you're increasing awareness of the information you give, how it can be used, and the awareness of how much we can be in return manipulated. Like, the more I actually increase my awareness that I know that ad that comes to me at 10 o'clock at night when I'm tired, that's perfectly related to a conversation I had earlier, instead of just jumping in and going, oh, wait, this is something that's been programmed to entice me. The more informed awareness that we have about what we're giving away and what we're getting back is really the deepest message that I'm hearing.
Yeah, well said. Yeah.
I can tell you the one little baby concern I've had as a couples therapist, and that is, as you relate to this AI, therapists do this. Therapists become too good of a mirror object for a client sometimes, so that in a way, nobody else compares. So if you get this AI that's engaging with you on an emotional level and always has this sort of perfect response to what it is that you need out there in the world, it is really hard, I imagine, to tolerate your partner or your parent who gets it imperfectly, right?
Except for me, of course.
Well, you always get it perfectly. But that was just a little side note I've always been worried about. If we just keep programming something to match exactly what I need every single time in every occasion, and it's not actually human, it's something that's trained to know what I need, then how do I tolerate the messiness everyone else in the world, the imperfect parents? So I feel like we just have to be aware that we become more and more intolerant of feeling discomfort. And that's like we started at the beginning, like how important it is to tolerate the pain, the discomfort, and the healing, rather than to look for the perfect match that I never get challenged. But that's my side note.
Well said. Good questions.
Mm-hmm. And then just sort of wrapping around that you've connected with Jimmy, that is also a TikTok influencer. Can you say a little bit about that, how y'all came together and what you're doing? And then, of course, anything that you want to let our audience know that they might be interested in.
Oh, sure. Yeah. Well, so there's a guy named Jimmy on relationships. You might see him on YouTube or Instagram or TikTok. He just makes these sweet, quirky little videos just on relationship advice. And he does these skits where he wears a wig, and they're pretty humorous and funny. And you've probably seen his videos floating around.
Absolutely. It's in my algorithm or whatever.
Yeah. He's great. So me and him collaborated, and we created a couples course together. He's a really great guy. He's not a therapist or anything, but he's just really insightful, well-read. And so we kind of put our heads together. I brought some of the clinical expertise, and we created a couples course just on conflict and got to just speak to really just the heart of the matter. He's so talented at communicating just things that feel like it's a rat nest, like how in the world would I put this into words? And then he can just find the way to explain it so crystal clear. And so, yeah, he's great that way. So we created a couples course. Yeah, if anyone's interested in it, you can totally pick it up. It's you can find it on my website or on my social media channels. But yeah,
Which is what?
Matthias J. Barker. So yeah, if you see my name on the episode title, you can just type it in. There's a J in the middle, so Matthias J. Barker. You can see it in the link in my bio there. You can find it, or on my website, which is matthiasjbarker.com. For anyone that was interested in the estrangement stuff that I was doing, just estrangement.com. That's where I do the groups, and maybe you're facing a parent-child situation that you want some, I don't know, guidance in. I'd love to be a part of helping that out. We have a community of 1,000 people, so yeah, that's great too.
That was really fun. I really appreciate it. I guess we're going to see you at Psychotherapy Networker. So
Good. Yes.
Hopefully
I'm glad.
connect. We're presenting there too. So
Wonderful.
But it's been just a joy to meet you.
Yeah.
And to get a chance to take an hour to talk with you. Really appreciate you coming on.
Yeah. Yeah. Thank you so much. Thanks for having me.
All right. Thanks, everyone. And we'll see you around the bend.
Therapist Uncensored is Ann Kelly and Sue Marriott. This podcast is edited by Jack Anderson.